Welcome to Never Too Late for Fitness Radio, bringing baby boomers proven strategies and innovative products for getting fit, staying fit, so you can live a longer, healthier, and happier life. Here's your host, best-selling author and fitness advocate, Phil Ferris.
Welcome to Never Too Late for Fitness Radio. My goal for each show is to provide solid information that helps people over 50 to get fit, stay fit, and lead a longer, healthier, happier life. Now, to be honest, we often think of exercise and fitness as something that makes us look and feel younger and more attractive. When you look at all the ads for fitness, they generally show men with six-pack abs and women in bikini bodies. Today's show is a little bit different. It's going to look at how fitness can save your life. Every year, more than 140,000 people in the U.S. die from a stroke, and it's the third leading cause of death. It's also the number one cause of disability. When you look at strokes as a part of a broader problem, cardiovascular disease, it's even worse. Together, the conditions related to cardiovascular disease, stroke, coronary heart disease, etc., kill more people every year than all forms of cancer combined. Just to put this in perspective, 1 in 31 women in the U.S. die from breast cancer, but 1 in 3 will die from cardiovascular disease. Today's guest will share a very personal and powerful story about how those statistics became personal and helped him discover important keys to promoting better health, wellness, and longevity. Joel Jameson is widely considered one of the world's foremost authorities on strength and conditioning for combat sports, having trained many of the sport's best athletes since 2004. He is the author of the best-selling book, Ultimate MMA Conditioning, and is a contributing writer to several top magazines and frequent guest speaker at conferences and seminars all over the world. Joel has worked with and consulted extensively for teams and organizations ranging from Navy SEALs to Lifetime Fitness, and his BioForce HRV system is used by teams in the NFL, NBA, MLS, NCAA, and more. He is best known for his individualized approach to training that is both based on his solid background in science and very practical to apply. Thank you, Joel, for being with us here today.
No problem. Happy to be on.
Now, Joel, I've got to be honest with you here. Most of my listeners are not MMA fighters. But the lessons you learned from your mother's stroke speak volumes to everyone, especially baby boomers. Besides becoming a very personal statistic, would you tell us about your mother's stroke and what you learned that caused you to redefine your priorities, your training, and, as you said, your life?
Yeah, so my mom was a flight attendant at the time, and she was commuting back and forth. She was living in Seattle, and she was based in New York, so she was flying across the country just to do her job. And then, of course, as a flight attendant, she was traveling all over the U.S. and the world in different time zones and different schedules and, in consistent eating schedules and, just kind of all over the place. And she was, looking healthy. By all accounts, you looked at her and you wouldn't think she was unhealthy or that she was at risk for a stroke or any sort of cardiovascular problem. She had, normal body weight. She'd never smoked her whole life. She didn't drink. She exercised, when she was younger. She didn't really look like somebody you'd expect to be sick or to have any underlying symptoms of, an impending stroke. And all of a sudden one day I get a call and her mom's down in Miami on a trip and sure enough she'd had a stroke. And so the biggest thing I realized is, you can't judge a book by its cover. It can happen to anybody. And you can't just assume that people that get cardiovascular disease, it's because they're overweight or it's because they smoked or it's because they didn't take care of themselves and they're maybe drinking or whatever the case may be. The reality is, as you introduce the show, 1 out of 3 will die from it, and that's a startling statistic. So it really just opened my eyes to the fact that this is not just a problem of people that are overweight or smoke or drink or whatever. It's something that literally everybody deals with, and everybody either has a friend or a loved one or a family member or somebody that's had or will have a stroke or heart attack or something related. So it really just opened my eyes to the seriousness and the epidemic, and got me thinking and trying to understand what could cause it to happen to somebody that by all accounts seemed to be healthy and seemed to have everything in order, and then next thing you know she's in the hospital with stroke. So it was just a real big eye opener from that perspective for me.
Okay. Now you said that, as you did research to kind of find out the underlying cause, it made you reflect and change many things in your life. Could you share some of the things that you decided to change because of what you learned?
Yeah, I obviously I've been in training my whole life and enjoy it. I'd always spent more time lifting weights and more time kind of doing those sorts of things and less time in the conditioning side of things, even though I worked with lots of combat athletes that were, obviously the best conditioned athletes. My personal training tended to focus more on strength training and trying to get bigger and stronger and all the typical male things. And, really after watching what she went through, I evaluated my own cardiovascular fitness and got some inflammation marker tests done and some blood work done, and just started taking a much more holistic approach and started to really figure out the best ways for me to prevent that. And that meant a lot of things, honestly, from nutrition to training to relaxation, recovery. Just really change my perspective in terms of what's really important. I mean, is it important enough to build bigger muscles or be stronger than to sacrifice your health a bit? And the answer is no. And so I just started having a much more well-rounded approach to my own training, from, like I said, from everything from training to nutrition and in between.
Yeah, a lot of people, and I include myself in this in my earlier days, if I couldn't get a workout in every day, then I try and make up with it with an extra heavy, more intense one. Instead of spending 45 minutes working out every day, I'd spend 2.5 hours at the gym trying to make up for the fact that I hadn't worked out for a week, and that perhaps isn't the best way to for long-term success. I think you had a quote that said, why consistency is a better pathway to success than intensity, and it's something that your mentality is lift heavier, get bigger, stronger. It's a mindset that works in some environments, but it has some drawbacks.
Exactly. I mean, I think the biggest problem with fitness today is people have this idea that intensity is the only thing that gets results, and you have to go to the gym and feel like you're really working yourself over and barely able to walk out of the gym if you want to get results. But the reality is, when you push yourself that hard and you try to do it frequently, eventually the body pushes back and the brain pushes back, and you either end up injured or you lose motivation, or you just you end up missing days for various reasons. And the reality is, being consistent is the most important thing, and the only way to be consistent is to really vary your intensity. So these days, and for most of my clients, almost everybody, 2 or 3 days of kind of those hard, high-intensity workouts a week is really all you need, and all really your body's going to be able to recover from. Everything else, should be at a lower to moderate intensity. And the general rule of thumb is if you walk out of the gym feeling better than when you went in, you probably did the right things most of the time. If you walk out of the gym feeling like you never want to go back, you probably did the wrong thing. So, I think people just mistake intensity as a weapon, but really it's one tool of many, and you need to be able to be more varied in your approach and have a couple high intensity days a week, and the rest of the days you go in there feel like you got a good workout and walk out feeling better.
Okay, that's great. I want to dig underneath that a little bit, back into some of the research you came up with, because you said from your research with your mother, you learned that the underlying cause of your mother's stroke was inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
How does inflammation represent a similar threat to the people that are listening here today?
Yeah, well, the more and more you look at research these days, the more they're discovering that everything from obesity to cardiovascular disease, stroke, a variety of conditions are related to this chronic inflammatory condition in our body. There's a lot of research now that supports that's how you get the plaque that builds up in your arteries, and that's what sets off the chain of events that leads to metabolic syndrome, which is what makes the whole thing worse. And it's this big cascade of events. It all starts essentially with an underlying chronic inflammatory condition where you're essentially chronically have a low level of inflammation that doesn't go away. And what people don't realize is that inflammation is not just a byproduct of physical stress, but also mental stress as well. So there's a good amount of research now that's showing mental challenging, stressful events cause the release of inflammatory markers, and those things are what contribute to this chronic low-grade inflammation that so many people suffer from, and that's ultimately what is the biggest contributing factor to cardiovascular disease and stroke and a whole host of other diseases, really.
Okay, and that stress really is a byproduct of the relationship between the autonomic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Can you, without going into a textbook science class, but can you give a quick overview how those two systems come into play and are both important to and can, both to growth and adaptation, and also can be something that, can be harmful in the long run.
Sure. So you've got the autonomic nervous system, and that's really responsible for controlling a lot of things in your body that you don't have to consciously think about. So I don't consciously think about my heart beating. I don't consciously think about my blood pressure. I don't consciously think about, maintaining oxygen levels. Those things all happen automatically. And the autonomic nervous system does that through two branches. One's called the sympathetic and one's called the parasympathetic. And those two systems work together to essentially keep you alive and make sure your body produces and stores the energy it needs so you can have it when you need it. So in short, the sympathetic system is what's responsible. It's part of the fight or flight response, and we think about that as it produces lots of energy. It produces and releases a bunch of hormones that support that and makes your body stronger. It's the fight or flight. It prepares your body literally for fight or flight. So hormones like adrenaline and hormones like cortisol and all these different things get produced when that system's turned on, and at the same time, it turns the immune system on and produces and supports heightened levels of inflammation. Now, the other side of the equation is the parasympathetic system, and that's the other side that's responsible for rest, digest, recovery, all those sorts of things, and that's what causes your body to rebuild muscle tissue or rebuild tissues and make them stronger. That's what facilitates essentially recovery. That's what turns off the inflammation. And its job is to work with the sympathetic system to keep you in balance. But the problem is, in today's society, people are chronically stressed out, whether they're sitting in traffic, whether they're worried about paying the bills, whether they're worried about their boss and deadlines, whatever the case may be. All of those mentally stressful things cause your heart rate to go up. And when you cause your heart rate and blood pressure to go up, it's because the sympathetic system is essentially turned on a low level. And again, that facilitates inflammation. And if you don't shut that off, then you get runaway inflammation. That's how you get chronic inflammation. So again, really it's just people's daily lives of, not eating well or not sleeping or maybe not working out, and maybe working out too hard, and maybe being stuck in traffic and being frustrated, or all these things that we deal with. Those cause a sympathetic response, and that sympathetic response causes inflammation to go up. And if we don't spend as much time on the other side trying to get it to come back down and focus on the recovery and the regeneration and the rest, then we end up with a chronic inflammatory situation, and we go down the path that, like I said, 1 out of every 3 people do, and end up with cardiovascular disease.
Okay. Now, it's not that acute inflammation is bad, or that, getting the adrenaline up, because that's what we do when we get into it's important when we have an important event, or we're going to lift a weight, or if we're going to run a race, or anything we do, we want to get in that heightened state of awareness and athletic ability. It's that after that, it's the turning it off and letting the body recover from that time. And if we don't give that recovery period of time, then the body starts to break down. Is that? Yeah,
that's exactly right. And I always try to, make people understand it's not that any of these hormones are good or bad. They do their job. And the sympathetic's job is preparing for fight or flight. And like you said, you need that for any sort of training or high intensity or any sort of thing that needs more energy. I mean, you need it just to walk around. You need that system to do its job. But like you said, the problem becomes when that never gets shut off. And biologically, we were designed to have that sympathetic stress response for, emergency life-threatening situations. We weren't really designed to sit in, offices and traffic and home and have that system on all the time, which is, again, what happens as a lot of people's stressful lives, just get the better of them. And again, it's not that the system's bad. It's just that system wasn't designed to be on, 18 hours a day. It was designed to be on only when you needed it and then be shut back off. But with our society the way it is today, there's so much stress out there, people leave that system on too long, and that's where you get problems. It's not the problem with the system, it's the problem with how long you leave it on for, and that's where you run into problems.
Okay. Now, you shared 3 tips that most people can use to effectively manage their inflammation. And the first one is to follow the 80-20 rule. Can you explain this rule and why most exercise and fitness programs today have this ratio backwards?
Yeah, so the 80-20 rule comes from a lot of research they did on endurance athletes, really all over the world and across a wide spectrum. And the reason this is important is because going back to a different piece of research, they've looked at different populations and tried to figure out how athletic endeavors and how different sports And fitness levels for different sports correlate to life expectancy, and consistently the only athletes that improve their life expectancy are aerobic endurance athletes, and they live anywhere from about 4 to 8 years longer than your average person, and that's a significant amount of time. I mean, I don't know too many people that wouldn't like to live 48 years longer. So if you look at what the training is that the majority of these endurance athletes do, that again was based on some research. They looked at this programs all over the world. About 80% of their training time is spent at a lower intensity level, and only about 20% of their training time is at the highest intensity levels. And so the 80-20 rule just seemed to hold steady across, again, a wide variety of endurance sports, a wide variety of ages and athletes. And again, the research is pretty clear that 80-20 seems to be what is about the right ratio for improving aerobic fitness. And again, if we look at all the research we have combined, aerobic fitness is the best thing we can do to prevent cardiovascular disease and the inflammation that's, a big driver of it. So, that's kind of the simple rule of thumb. Like I said, if you leave the gym most times feeling better than when you left, and only a couple times, out of the 10, or however you look at it, you walk out of the gym feeling like you really got a hard workout and you're going to be real tired afterwards. If you just kind of stick to that 80-20 rule, chances are you'll be doing the right things and on the right track.
So this doesn't necessarily mean that intensity is bad. It's really, you're saying it's about the balance with the low intensity.
It's a dose. I mean, everything is about a dose. There's always some amount that's not enough, some amount that's the right amount, and some amount that's too much. And it's very easy to have too much intensity in your program. And people think that they're not training intensely, they're not getting results. But again, the reality is consistency is what's driving the results, not just going to the gym day in and day out and trying to run yourself into the ground. It's being smart about it. It's training hard when your body's ready for it, and training easier when when your body may not be. And again, most people out there are gonna do well by 2 to 3 times a week at the most, having a harder workout, and the rest of the time having more moderate, easier workouts that they feel good about.
Joe, can you give me some guidelines of how do I know what is high intensity for me or for anyone? How do they guide whether I'm doing something that's high intensity versus low intensity?
I mean, the easiest way is to look at your heart rates for metabolic type work and to look at the percentage of your maximum you're lifting weight. So let's say your maximum heart rate is 200 or whatever the case may be. Anytime you're above about 90% of that, that's a really high intensity. When you're on the upper 80%, you're still pretty high intensity. But if you're about 85 or below, that's where your lower to moderate intensity ranges are going to be, particularly below 80%. So really, it's just about high intensity. Again, if you keep your keep your trained heart rate below 80-85% of what your maximum is, chances are you're going to be doing a more low to moderate intensity. If you start getting the upper 80s and the 90% of your max and above, that's going to be a high intensity workout. And the same thing from a strength training perspective. If you're lifting 90% or above of your maximum weights, or you're going to failure every set, then you're training high intensity and you're using high intensity and you're putting a lot of stress in the body. If you're using significantly less than that, 85% again, let's say, and below, and you're not going to failure all the time, chances are you're at a more moderate intensity level. So the easiest way is really just looking at kind of what percent of your maximum you're at. If you stick below 90% and stick below that threshold for the majority of your workout, I'm not saying you can't ever hit that during the workout, but the majority of your time is spent below those 90% ranges. And obviously you're not training for 2 hours at a time. If you fall, if you're in those ranges below that 90% and you're training for an hour, a reasonable amount of time, chances are you're in the right frame for the lower intensities.
And this would apply to whether a person, let's say in weights, bench presses 300 pounds or bench presses 100 pounds. It's still high intensity for me is what high intensity is for me, not what it is.
Yeah, exactly. It's your own max. If you're, anytime you go again above 90, what the reality is, the reason that the numbers kind of hold is anytime you start going above those 90% numbers or getting close to them, that's where the sympathetic system really has to turn on in order to facilitate that high level of force and power and energy. I mean, that's where it really starts to come into play at the highest levels, and that's where the body, is under the most amount of stress. So, if you avoid those high intensity ranges in the upper 80s and 90% and above, then the overall impact on the body is significantly lower. So you just want to be aware that when you're going into those 90% plus ranges, that's where the high intensity is truly high intensity.
Okay. Now, the second tip you gave is to keep track of the markers or systematic inflammation. Now, this sounds kind of clinical to me. Perhaps you could describe what that means and how do you actually do it?
Yeah, well, there's a couple ways. I mean, you can certainly go the clinical route, and you can have a doctor track things like CRP and some other markers of inflammation, fibrinogen, and or there's a tool that I developed a few years ago called BioForce HRV, and it's based on this technology called heart rate variability. And what that does is measures the activity level of that parasympathetic nervous system, which, again, that is the easiest way to think about that is that's your anti-inflammatory system, because that's the job is to turn off the inflammation produced by the sympathetic nervous system. So that overall activity of that system correlates very well to inflammatory levels in the body, and there's lots of research showing particularly that your average level of heart rate variability correlates to life expectancy, and the reason for that is because, again, it's correlating to your body's ability to shut off inflammation and achieve that balance. So it's a really simple way. It's an inexpensive system. You can spend 2.5-3 minutes a day measuring it. I mean, it doesn't require blood work or going to a doctor or something you can do on your own at home. And just looking at that number over time and seeing your average change is a really simple way to measure whether or not that balance is there, or if you're pushing too hard, or if maybe you've got room to push even more, and just kind of finding your own balance of what's the right amount to push, and whether or not all the stuff is working.
Now, the BioForce system is
no, so it's essentially a chest strap and a mobile application for Android or iOS. So you just download the application, you do a little 2-minute, 30-second test where the phone connects to your chest strap, and it's reading the variability between beats of heart rate and then doing some math and then giving you a score, and that score represents essentially the overall activity of that parasympathetic nervous system. And along with that, it gives you a little color, a green, an amber, or red, that kind of gives you a green light a day to push yourself, or an amber meaning you should back off a bit, or a red, which means you're really fatigued and you want to take it easy that day. So it's just a simple little feedback tool to see what's the appropriate level of training for the day, whether or not you're on the right track, or what the case may be. And so, again, you just need a mobile phone, Android, iOS. It works with pretty much all of them, and then it comes with a chest strap, and that's it.
Okay, great. And you use this not only for yourself, but with your the athletes and as well as the other people you train with, kind of the average Joe. So they all use the same system.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the way the system works is it's comparing you to yourself. It's not comparing you to some world-class athlete and telling you where you're at. It's literally looking at you each day relative to kind of where your averages are. And what we know is that when you have days where your number is significantly higher or lower than your average, it's a sign that your body is under stress or recovering from stress, and it's not ready to be pushed fully again. So the system is fully tuned to your own body. It's not comparing you to some elite athlete or somebody with totally different goals. It's looking at how you are changing over time. So it doesn't matter if you're a baby boomer, or you're a professional athlete, or you're a stay-at-home mom, whatever the case may be. It's about your own body and how you're changing over time, and that's how the system fundamentally works.
So when I get up in the morning, and let's say today is scheduled to be my hard workout day, I look at my scores, and it says, man, may not want to push it. So that's just a piece of feedback that I can look at to say, okay, body's probably not ready. This is probably not the best time to max out things. Is that kind of a way of looking at it?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, like I said, it's really just a gauge. Is today the right day that I should go 100%, or is today a day I'm better off, taking it a little bit easier so I can come back the next day and go harder? It's just it's a stoplight system. It just tells you, is my body ready to be pushed today, or is it a better idea to recover a little bit and then push it when it's ready for it?
Okay. The third tip, you said, is to learn to turn your sympathetic system off. So how do you actually go about doing that? There's some techniques you can share with us that will help them do that?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest thing is to start by using heart rate as a feedback. So if we can drive our heart rate down through different means, then we know that we're turning the parasympathetic system on, because the sympathetic turns the heart rate up and blood pressure up, and the parasympathetic system turns the heart rate down. So the easiest way, find things that you personally find relaxing. So a lot of people, meditation and just being in a quiet room, or listening to music, or really different breathing drills to slow their breathing down. All those sorts of things can help bring that parasympathetic system up and thus turn the heart rate down. So the easy thing for people to do is put a heart rate monitor on, see where their heart rate's at, and then start to learn how to bring that heart rate down. You get through deep breathing drills or meditation, or whatever things that people find relaxing. The key is to just find something that's relaxing to you that brings the heart rate down and consistently do it, even if it's only 10 to 15 minutes a day. It can be a really powerful thing to just spend those 10 or 15 minutes shutting that sympathetic system off. Because a lot of times that's all it takes is just shut the system off, and it's going to stay off for the rest of the day. Versus if you don't do that, then a lot of times it can just stay heightened or stay active all day. So everyone's different. I mean, people find different things relaxing. Maybe it's spending time reading a book. Maybe it's spending some time going for a walk outside and then coming back and listening to some music. Whatever the case may be, just people need to find those things that they find relaxing that cause that parasympathetic system to turn on and decrease their inflammatory response to the sympathetic system. So just use heart rate as a guide. If you can get your heart rate as low as possible and find activities that drop it 5 beats, 3 beats, whatever the case may be from your normal resting, then you're doing the right thing. So it's easy enough just to pick a heart rate monitor up, or if you have BioForce, you can look at it that way. But just spend, literally 10 or 15 minutes a day of trying to get your heart rate as low as you can, and intentionally relaxing and intentionally doing things that bring the heart rate down are highly beneficial and not that difficult to do. It's just people have to take time out of their day. The 10 or 15 minutes has to come out of your day, and you have to intentionally do it. But it can make a huge difference, and I've seen people literally increase their HRV and look and feel better in a very short period of time from 10 minutes a day of meditation or deep breathing or whatever the case may be. It can make a significant difference from a small amount per day.
I know that you mentioned that a very effective way or high-impact way of doing this, or time of day to do this, is before bed. That by doing it before bed, there's some specific benefits. Would you
absolutely.
Can you explain why that's so important to turn it off before you go to sleep?
Yeah, sleep is one of the most important things that that you do in the day. Honestly, it's the biggest driver of recovery and of the ability to turn the inflammation off and for the brain to repair itself, and all sorts of things happen. So if we can shut that sympathetic system off and really facilitate the parasympathetic before you go to sleep, we have much better quality of sleep, and that adds up. That makes a huge difference in people's lives. So I really encourage people to consider how important sleep is, and doing things like turning your phone off or putting your phone in a different room, not having your TV in your room, having blackout blinds so it's dark, making sure you have a good bed. You get people spend thousands of dollars on stuff that's not really important, and then they'll skimp on a mattress, which is where you spend a third of your life. So investing in a really good mattress and pillows and bedding, and just making sure that your bed and your overall sleeping environment is the highest, the best it can be, can make a huge difference in people's health. Because again, you're spending 8 hours, a third of your life in bed sleeping, and the quality of that sleep can affect everything from your health, your wellness, your body composition, everything else. So the best thing to do is spend those 10 or 15 minutes before you go to bed really trying to drive your heart rate down as low as you can. And again, that could be listening to music, that could be reading a book, that could be doing some breathing drills, that could be stretching, that could be a million things that can bring the heart rate down. It can really facilitate just a deeper, more higher level of quality of sleep, and that can drive huge improvements in health and wellness.
Well, that's great. Well, Bill, I really appreciate you sharing your story and the strategies and techniques, very practical, down-to-earth things that we can do and we can use. If our listeners wanted to try the BioForce HRV system, where would they go?
Yeah, sure. Just BioForceHRV.com is where we have the system available. You just BioForceHRV.com. We have everything on there to order it. Again, it works for Android phones, iOS phones. It works for just about anything these days, and it takes a few days for the system to start to read you and understand what your own HRV looks like. But after about a week, you'll start to really get information to help you just dial things in. And looking at that score, that HRV number, is a really powerful way to assess, are the things that you're doing in your life improving your health, or are they making them worse? And if you see that score going up over time, that's a good sign. It tells you you're healthy. It tells you your things are improving. It tells you everything is going in the right direction. When you start to see periods where that number's going down and down and down, you're probably needing to change things up or re-examine your stress levels or things that you're doing to cause that and try to prevent it. So it's a really powerful tool. Like I said, everybody that I work with uses it, whether they're training to be an elite level athlete, or they're just training to feel good, or they're someone like my mom who's just trying to be as healthy as she can and live her years out with high quality of living. So it's a really valuable tool for anybody.
Great. Now, you also have another site which has a lot of information on fitness and training and health. That's 28 days out. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
It's 8 weeks out. So
8 weeks out. Right.
8 weeks out. Yep, that's just the number 8, and then weeksout.com, and that's like you said, that's where I post articles and videos and lots of different content for various training. And that's where I post most of my stories and articles and tips, so that you can actually get access to BioForce in there as well. But 8weeksout.com is where people can go if they want to learn more about how you do the 80-20 rule and what different training methods work and kind of how to put more of the pieces together.
A lot of articles and videos that are very, very helpful and informative, so I found it would be a great resource. Well, Joel, thank you so much for sharing your story and your information. I really appreciate it. I wish you the best, and you have a great day.
Thanks again for having me on. Hope your audience finds it valuable, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Take care, Joel.
You too.
You've been listening to Never Too Late for Fitness Radio, hosted by Phil Ferris. To learn more about the guests or resources on our show today, or to listen to past episodes, go to nevertoolateforfitness.com.